fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Once you believe that there's a possibility that someone entered this home, then there's a whole world of suspects as opposed to just the people in this house.
In the end, all the key players will have to take some responsibility for what happens to this investigation. If the police, inexperienced in homicide investigations, would have gotten help at the beginning of the case, things might have turned out differently. The Ramseys, whether they were suspects or not, could have been more cooperative.
You know, we can spend the next 3 years talking about who should have done what, who did what wrong, who did what right. The point is, there's still a killer loose. Let's admit there were mistakes made. I'll admit we made mistakes. I won't go any further than that.
I'm going to admit that mistakes were made. Let's all admit that mistakes were made, but I'm not going to take it further than that. Let's admit that mistakes were made. I'm just not going to talk about them. So I'm admitting mistakes were made, but I just don't want to admit what the mistakes were, right? So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the third and final installment of the special 27-year anniversary coverage of the JONBENET Ramsey case. We're going to deal with a couple of things that you never hear about when people talk about the case, especially now. We're going to talk about the Pageantry of Christmas, and there's no better time to talk about the Pageantry of Christmas and to understand it and to feel it than at Christmas time. I can talk about a different time of the year, you know, around Halloween or Thanksgiving or Easter time, you know, summer or whatever, and oh yeah, Christmas, yeah. But there's no better time to talk about it than Christmas, to really get the energy and kind of what is going on during Christmas time. That is what is extremely idiosyncratic about the Ramsey case. It's one of the only cases we've dealt with that happens over Christmas. The other one is Scott Peterson and Lacey Peterson. Merry Christmas, Cara Jean. Good to see all of you here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so we are going to get cracking. I've also got some photos that Jean Karras sent me from Boulder. They're almost live photos. They were taken in the last less than 24 hours. What are the conditions on the ground early in the morning on the day after Christmas? And you know, what does it look like? If you go outside right now and you look at the ground in Boulder right now, 27 years later, what should you expect to see? What do you see? So we're going to look at that. And then I'm obviously going to take you to Boulder. Certainly I was there about a month ago. And my visit to the Christmas Star, and then also JONBENET's visit. JONBENET, one of the last things JONBENET did was visit that Christmas Star as well. And so we're going to talk about that and the significance of it. Think about what a star represents in the heavens. On a Christmas tree, the star above Bethlehem, what does a star represent? Well, doesn't it represent hope and light and truth and goodness? Well, that's what it's supposed to represent. It's supposed to represent all those things. But in this story, you have an inversion where there's supposed to be justice, there's darkness, where you're supposed to have a DA that is fighting for his community. Things seem to be hidden away. Where there's supposed to be light, there's darkness. Where there's supposed to be hope, there's misleading and covering up and all that kind of thing. And it's definitely very worrying. It's definitely very worrying. Stephanie, good to see you here. Terry, Dean, Sharon, good to see you as well. Chelsea, good to see you guys. So I think let's start with the pageantry of Christmas, and let's just put this picture on screen while we're doing that. That is a picture of the, shall I just show you guys? That is a picture of the star above Boulder from a particular angle. And I have to tell you, when when I went at night in search of this star, it was incredibly elusive. It's always sort of over there, and the closer you get to it, the more it seems to disappear. It's quite strange. As you come into the fabric of Boulder, and like I'm trying to take photos of it and video of it, and it sort of winks at you between the buildings and then it disappears. And there was something strangely appropriate about that, having written a book called Christmas Star, having written all these books about the JONBENET Ramsey case, and now it felt like, in a way, the final chapter for me. This is the last thing that I really want to do and need to do. And it's so obvious there it is, we know where we're going, but you just can't kind of see it and get to it. You can't, like, you just want to take a photo of it, but you just can't kind of see it. And I kind of wanted the juxtaposition of Boulder's street lights and a beautiful Christmas display with a star sort of hanging over it. And it's almost impossible to get that, which is almost appropriate. The fact that the star that is representing hope and light and all these things is kind of hidden away, kind of elusive. And yet, if you go to the effort, obviously it exists. You can go right up to it, and it becomes this enormous star that kind of is bigger, much bigger than you are. And it's kind of an embracing thing. It's this large thing with arms spread out over this small little twinkling town. So it is there if you make the effort to get to it. But in terms of Christmas, what are we talking about when we talk about Christmas? Here's another picture of that star. What are we talking about when we talk about Christmas? What do we think about when we think about Christmas? Well, Christmas is kind of a pageant. And if you've got kids, you know exactly what that's about. Somebody dresses up as Santa Claus. You dress up a tree. You dress up your home with lights and tinsel. You put all sorts of things in certain places, socks, all sorts of ornaments to represent things like fruits. And I think there are things like candy canes often hang from trees. They're not real, they're plastic. Candy canes, and all of it is supposed to represent the abundance, in a way, of summer, the fruits that you get in summer. Well, the hope that in the middle of winter that those fruits are kind of waiting for you, if you think about it. But if you think about it in a very true crime way, Santa is actually an intruder. Santa is someone who comes into your house, and what does he do? He leaves behind, he leaves something behind that's wrapped, right? And also, sometimes he leaves behind a note. Sometimes, if you're a child, you don't get a gift from mom or dad or this relative. You get a gift from Santa, and it's signed from Santa, right? And Stephanie actually sent me two beautiful cards that were from Santa, and they were hand drawn and everything. And so this is very much part of the tradition of Christmas, is that Santa Claus leaves a note, right? Santa Claus writes down a note, and he leaves a note with the things he's left behind, which he wraps. That's the spirit of Christmas, but that's also the psychology of Christmas. someone has totally gotten the wrong, what's the word, takeout from that. I'm not trying to say that Santa is the suspect. I'm trying to say that the psychology of Christmas, of leaving a note behind and wrapping things up and covering things up and an intruder coming in, is in the fabric of the Ramsey case, right? You guys get that? So in other words, if you wanted to cover this case up and you're thinking, okay, well, it's Christmas time, and what have I been busy with for the last while? Well, why not just the same thing? An intruder came in and left just like Santa would, and he left behind a note. I don't know if you're following what I'm saying, that someone was inspired by the actual Christmas story and then took it further. I mean, that's one way of interpreting it. And I mean, think about the pageantry of Christmas, and the child in this story was a child beauty queen, a child appearing in pageants, and so was her mother. Bria says, I'm in Canada right now for the holidays. It must be a pretty white Christmas. And he takes milk and cookies or pineapple. Well said, well said. Okay, so if you think about the basic thing of a Christmas gift, you wrap it in something. You wrap a Christmas gift in something, and you in other words, you cover it in a kind of wrapping paper so that you don't actually know what the gift is, right? That's the point of the wrapping, is that when you look at that gift, you don't know what it is. And as I said, it comes with a note. The note gives you some idea of what's supposed to be inside. Dear Fred, I know you've been wanting this for a long time. I hope you have a wonderful year. Love, Dad. And Fred might be, yeah, this is what I've always wanted, and maybe it is, right? And in other words, something is covered in something else, and the note is left behind before you open the gift, before you know what's inside. And that's part of the whole thing of Christmas. But there's another side to Christmas as well, which kind of keys into the true crime thing all over again, which is prior to Christmas, gifts are hidden away, aren't they? Before Christmas morning or Christmas Eve, depending on where you celebrate Christmas, you hide gifts away. You hide them away. Right? In other words, you're concealing from people around you what is going on. And in a way, if you think about the Chris Watts case, the Scott Peterson case, trying to think also to some extent the Mo Wilson story, the murder of Mo Wilson, you had people who were having secret relationships with a person. It's not a big step after that secret relationship to carry that secrecy when a murder takes place, to carry that legacy of lies and hiding things away and misleading people that you've done with your spouse, to now do that with law enforcement. In other words, you carrying over the same psychology of I'm having a secret relationship with someone and I'm hiding it away, and I when I say where were you, well, you give an answer, whatever. That same system is simply transferred to the police when the spouse is murdered, the girlfriend is murdered. It's the same system, except the stakes are now a lot higher. Now it's a criminal offense. And I'm simply saying, in the fabric of the Ramsey case, you have Christmas as the background. And how much of that psychology of Christmas is actually in the story? And bear in mind, at the end of the day, JONBENET Ramsey's lying literally under a Christmas tree. In fact, her father puts her down under the Christmas tree. Blue Flame, good to see you. Good to see you. And So that's a very kind of basic way of looking at the Ramsey case, but no one ever looks at it that way, because we get lost in the fabric of it. We get lost in the trees of it. And it is important to go to the fabric, which we will do. I just want to play a little bit more of this video clip where we hear from the district attorney.
But let's get on with it. Let's put the egos in the drawer. Let's go back and let's start over and let's find this creature before he kills again.
Some of the blame has to go to the Ramseys lawyers. Or maybe this case is just an example of the way our justice system is headed. D.A. Hunter's contribution to all of this is still to be determined. A question has been raised that could...
So just think about that. It's the year 2000, and there are kind of unexpressed feelings of concern. You've just heard it in this documentary. His legacy, Alex Hunter's legacy in terms of the story, they're saying in 2000 is yet to be determined. I have to say, I don't really feel like 27 years later, it has been sort of determined. I mean, if you think about it, it's been determined, but I don't really feel like the media ever talk about it, right? And they should. Instead, they talk about Gary Oliva, and they talk about another suspect and that whole tabloid shit show, right? You don't actually have the proper story dealt with on its own terms. And what I find strange is you can't deal with it 27 years later when the tabloids were dealing with it at the time, right? The people involved in this case were dealing with this issue at the time. Fleet White was dealing with it at the time. Can we please get a different prosecutor? His wife as well. The lead detective as well. Can we please get a different guy? No. And then what happens to the case? It mysteriously goes away. How did that happen? We don't know. But you were warned. You were warned about this lead prosecutor. Yeah, you've got a tabloid, this one. Look at what it says on the National Examiner. JONBENET cover-up, DAs helping Ramseys beat rap. Now, you might say, and I would agree, you can't rely on what the tabloids say. You know, the tabloids isn't a legal document. But guess what is the date of this particular article that is basically suggesting, introducing the idea of a corrupt DA or a DA that you can't rely on or a DA that needs to be replaced. When do you think the story came out in this National Examiner? When do you think it came out? When do you think it came out? In other words, when do you think this idea that we need to be careful with this important case in terms of the person who is in charge of it, when do you think that was being addressed even in the media? So Songbird says 2000, Baby Kisser says first grand jury. Well, would you believe that it was as early as 1997, as early as October 1997, they were concerned, right? October 1997. And this is the article dealing with it. They're showing them all the evidence. Insider blasts Lawman on JONBENET case. And of course, this is not the way to deal with it in a tabloid. It needs to be dealt with in the proper way. And was it ever dealt with in the proper way? Let's have a look at what this tabloid says. District Attorney Alex Hunter owns multi-million-dollar office property with Ramsey attorney William Gray. The district attorney owns a multi-million-dollar office property with a Ramsey attorney. So reading from this article by John Latter, instead of putting John and Patsy Ramsey behind bars for the brutal murder of their daughter, DA Alex Hunt is actually helping the couple beat the rap. That's the opening paragraph in October 1997. And you might say, and I think there's an exclamation mark at the end of that, and the word helping is in all caps. You might say, yeah, it's just tabloid reporting. Then you say, what happened 2 years later? Like literally 2 years later, what happened? And you might say, he legitimately believed that the evidence against him was very fragile, was very insubstantial, wasn't sufficient, right? And maybe that's true. Maybe legitimately this guy felt, after investigating this case for basically 3 years, and if you look at the amount of evidence, I've written books about many cases. The evidence in this case is enormous. The ransom note itself is one of the most elaborate pieces of crime scene evidence ever left behind at a crime scene. Just that on its own is a huge amount of evidence, not a scrap of paper or half a piece of paper, 3 different pages, plus the notepads and so on. And he had the temerity to say, oh, you know what, there's insufficient evidence to prosecute this case. That's not what the grand jury said. The grand jury didn't say, sorry, we can't actually come to a decision here because it's just too difficult. That's not what they said. They came up with 4 different indictments. 4. Not 1, not 2, 4. They didn't feel like there was insufficient evidence. But my point is, even if he legitimately felt, which I would think is a very bizarre thing, given the huge amount of evidence, given the months and months leading to years that the grand jury were involved in this case. Think about how quickly the grand jury in the Koberger case came and went and did their job, right? In this case, they were on the case for over a year and came to their decision. But the point is, let's say for whatever argument, the DA did think, you know what, this evidence just is not, I'm not convinced by it. I don't think Patsy wrote the ransom note, blah, blah, blah. Well, he did help the Ramseys by not taking the case any further. That is indisputable. In other words, this first paragraph here turned out to be an absolutely perfect prediction on what is about to happen. Insiders close to the case say Hunter's office has shown the Ramseys top secret information and evidence that should have been kept locked up and used to convict them. To make matters worse, records show that Hunter and his top deputy jointly own multi-million-dollar real estate with a Ramsey lawyer. The Ramseys' best defense attorneys are right inside Hunter's office, fumes one insider. Adds victims' rights attorney Dana Hoffman, this is a cover-up. The DA should have moved to arrest this couple a long time ago. That's another thing just to mention. How long did it take for the grand jury just to do its thing? Something like 3 years. In the Idaho 4 case, how long did the grand jury take to do its thing? About 6 months. So there was a long delay in the whole grand jury thing, and you've got to ask, was that by accident? Was that because they were working so hard for justice, or because people were working so hard to defeat justice? Alex Hunter's made some questionable moves that have helped the Ramseys, no doubt about it. That's a quote from this. He's making life easier, not harder, for the people he says are the prime suspects. A source close to the case told Vanity Fair magazine that the Ramseys were given, listen to this, the Ramseys were given copies of the most sensitive and critical police and detective reports. 2, reproductions of both the ransom note and the practice ransom note. I've never seen the practice ransom note, have you? A copy of the unedited tape of a Ramsey television appearance on CNN obtained by the Boulder authorities using a court order. Ramsey lead lawyer Hal Haddon even reportedly talked Hunt into giving him a private viewing of the original notes and the cord that was found on JONBENET's neck. Legendary FBI agent Greg McCreary says the outrageous leaks of evidence that could be used against the Ramseys is unprecedented and unprofessional. Now, Greg McCreary was kind of someone the Ramseys approached even before they approached John Douglas. They approached him ahead of John Douglas. They approached him because they saw him as a preferred candidate. And as far as I know, John Douglas admires Greg McCreary. John Douglas thinks Greg McCreary is a great profiler. Greg McCreary hasn't written books and he doesn't have the celebrity status around him. But you kind of get the idea that John Douglas took his cue and almost saw Greg McCreary as a Jedi master, and John Douglas himself is kind of like a Padawan learner. That's the kind of impression you get. And what is being quoted in this tabloid is that Greg McCreary, this very respected FBI dude, is saying the leaks used that could be used against the Ramseys are unprecedented and unprofessional. And he says it's an obstruction of justice overall. McCreary says it's even possible to make a case for wrongdoing or misconduct by a public official, Hunter. He's specifically, Greg McCreary is specifically pointing to Hunter and saying, this is not right. In 1997, in October 1997, why are they showing unindicted, uncharged murder suspects all the evidence? Says the source who spoke to Vanity Fair. Everything they have done is against the advice of the Boulder Police, the FBI, and the Attorney General's Capital Crimes Unit. Now, what I find really interesting is John Ramsey will criticize Boulder Police and he'll criticize this. But there's no criticism when it favors John Ramsey. When something that is ethically and morally and legally very, very dubious, but it favors the Ramseys, we're not going to talk about that. Somebody made some mistakes. I'm not going to talk about it, but some people made mistakes. I've never seen politics and preferential treatment play such a major role in any case. If the Ramseys had been some poor couple, they would have been in their face for a week, gotten a confession out of them, and filed first-degree murder charges against them within days. Hunter's critics were especially outraged over the bombshell of the financial link between his office and the Ramseys. And in a very simple way, you can say this person has got a conflict of interest. And you hear about it all the time. The judge in the Suzanne Morphew case, what do you call it when they excuse themselves? I think his name was Patrick Murphy. He said, okay, conflict of interest. I had a friendship or some kind of relationship, some kind of interaction with, I think, one of the Morphew kids. Something as slight as that. Okay, I'll recuse myself. In the Murdoch case right now, I think there's something similar, a recusal, or there was. And so here you've got literally financial chumminess going on, and the guy is allowed to stay on. Hunter owns 3.6%, Gray owns 7%, but Hunter's deputy, First Assistant District Attorney Bill Wise, owns a whopping 42% of this office complex that they've kind of got shares in. In other words, you've got a lawyer from this side, a lawyer from that side, a lawyer from that side, all having kind of financial stakes in property in Boulder. Hunter has also admitted that the man on whom he relies most is his team's top trial lawyer, Peter Hofstrom, who socializes with Ramsey lead lawyer Haddon. And Hofstrom regularly chats over breakfast with Haddon's partner, another Ramsey attorney, Brian Morgan. The whole arrangement is way too close for comfort. At the very least, Hunter's been so deferential to the Ramseys and accommodating to their lawyers that he has botched the case. This is what they're saying in October 1997, that basically that the case has been botched not even on the 1-year anniversary. And then is it really such a complete surprise what happens in 1999 that it's kept secret for 14 years and that we are where we are today another 13 years after that? It's really such a big surprise. So if you want to verify this, this is the National Examiner, America's Favorite Family Weekly, October 14, 1997. JONBENET cover-up. There you have it. But let's hear what he says. Let's hear how he explains himself in 2000 and 1998 and elsewhere. Let's just see what he says.
Could put yet another twist on how he will be remembered in this case. Did the grand jury really vote to indict the Ramseys? And did Alex Hunter decide against it because he felt he didn't have the evidence?
So can you believe it? A year later, you've got a documentary literally asking the question, what really happened with that indictment? Did he really kind of feel there was insufficient evidence? That's not a question to ask in 2023. They were asking that question at that point because they'd kind of been suspicious all along. And were they right to be suspicious? I just want to alert mods to comments like this. Please don't make specific accusations of guilt to the Ramsey parents unless you want to go to court and defend them, right? Because you, like Steve Thomas, you could be wrong and then you're going to be in a load of trouble. And there's a lot of litigation surrounding this case. There was a $750 million lawsuit in 2016 against someone who made accusations. In that same year, there was another lawsuit. I think it was 115 or 150 million. So in the same year, $750 million lawsuit and a $150 million lawsuit. So please don't make those sort of allegations here, right? Please don't do that. You're allowed to say, I don't think that person did it, or I don't think that person did it. And this is for your sake. This is for your sake and mine as well, right? So let's play that again. What he's saying is, he's literally talking about the grand jury indictments. What really happened there? And that was a good question to be asking in August 2000, when the statute of limitations on those charges were actually still, well, they hadn't expired, put it that way.
To all of this is still to be determined. A question has been raised that could put yet another twist on how he will be remembered in this case. Did the grand jury really vote to indict the Ramseys? And did Alex Hunter decide against it because he felt he didn't have the evidence?
No charges have been filed.
He told.
So we're going to deal with that in a second, but I think you need to take that question in two ways. First of all, did Alex Hunter, let's just go back to those exact words. And I just want to play again the role that Ramsey's attorneys played in this as well.
Some of the blame has to go to the Ramseys' lawyers. Or maybe this case is just an example of the way our justice system is headed. D.A. Hunter's contribution to all of this is still to be determined. A question has been raised that could put yet another twist on how he will be remembered in this case. Did the grand jury really vote to indict the Ramseys? And did Alex Hunter decide against it?
And the answer is yes. The grand jury did vote to indict the Ramseys, and Alex Hunter did vote against it. Then the next question is, why? Why did he vote against it? And the legitimate reason would be to say, because I legitimately believe I think there's a real legal argument that there just wasn't enough evidence, right? And what I'm saying is, do you think that that is true? Do you think that if somebody said, and I just want to say this, the Ramsey lawyers had something like 5 handwriting experts, 5, make their case that Patsy Ramsey wasn't the author of the ransom note. I'm just talking about the handwriting here. I could spend 5-10 hours going through all the evidence, fiber, fingerprints, the autopsy evidence, the pineapple, footprints in the snow, the weather conditions. I can go on for hours and hours and hours. But just in terms of the ransom note, Team Ramsey hired 5 handwriting experts, and they gave their various assessments to the grand jury. The prosecution basically fielded 2 people. One was Sina Wong, who they basically said, you know what, we're not really happy to hear what you've got to say because were you certified for that? And in other words, they argued against the admissibility of the stage 1 handwriting expert, and then the other one was Chetubowski. But the bottom line was ultimately what they were saying is, did you guys ever even handle the original ransom note, meaning the prosecution, meaning the Boulder detective side? Did you guys, the handwriting experts, did you ever see or handle the original ransom note? Right? Here's the writing pad, and right, here's the original ransom note. Now, to do proper handwriting analysis, you need the original to make a lot of determinations. What's the pressure that was made on the writing? What impressions are on the writing itself? You can do very good analysis using a microscope, looking at the little idiosyncrasies. Guess what? The state side only got like photocopies, and the defense said legitimately, our analysis is much better and is far more valid than yours because we had the original ransom note. And then you say, I don't understand this. Why does the defense have the ransom note but not the original, but not the other side? And then you've kind of got to ask, did Alex Hunter give them the ransom note, the original? And then of course the original is gone. Oh, and then you have this situation that's totally unfair, where the one side makes a legitimate legal argument. We had the original, our analysis is far more valid than what yours is. But then you've also got to say their analysis was that Patsy didn't write the ransom note. But I mean, that's their job. Their job is as an expert to say that. And the power is taken out of the state's experts' hands because they say, well, did you even analyze from the original? But that's a very good example of how you make the playing field within the court thing totally unfair. Thanks a lot for that, Jody. Thank you. So that's just one example.
Because he felt he didn't have the evidence.
No charges have been filed.
He told us he could not comment on what the grand jury did, but he did say,
I mean, I can point to cases, and you have talked about cases where the prosecutor is pushed to move. I frankly think the prosecution in OJ was pushed to move by the Cochran group too quickly. I think they fell for it. It was lost.
So what I think is really ironic with that is, yeah, you have a district attorney that you could say almost has no experience in taking cases to trial because he's done it so seldom, right? You've got a prosecutor, a district attorney, who's giving legal advice and who's making these statements on camera about the way to prosecute a case, right? When he's not been doing it himself. In other words, he doesn't have a track record where he can say, I took 10 cases to trial and I got 9 convictions, or I took 20 cases to trial and I got 18 convictions. And here he is giving advice for the O.J. Simpson prosecutor, right? Yeah, I mean, I just find it ridiculous. You should not be giving anybody advice on how to take cases to trial and how long you should take or anything like that. And I mean, I think the JONBENET Ramsey case is a good example of how to fuck up the legal protocols and how to fuck up the legal process, right? Please don't give advice to somebody else on how to get it right, unless you've got a track record, unless you know someone who does have that track record. And as far as I've seen, from everything I've seen, Alex Hunter doesn't have that, and certainly not in a homicide sense. We also saw yesterday there were 60 cases, 60 convictions for cases involving incest, and only one guy went to jail on Hunter's watch. That was what we heard yesterday. I don't know if you should be giving advice on how other people should take cases to trial. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Over. And I don't think that's what this little girl wants me to do. When I try to look through her eyes, that is not what she wants me to do, and I am not going to give into the crowd, if you will.
Well, he absolutely didn't give in to the crowd, and I do think there may be an insight in that. And there I can tip my hat a little bit to Alex Hunter, is if he was truly a good guy, if he was truly thinking about what's the right thing to do in this situation. In other words, what would JONBENET want me to do, right? Would JONBENET want her parents to get into trouble? Would JONBENET want her brother to get into trouble, right? And it's hard to think that would be the case, that JONBENET would say that I'd like my brother to pay for this, or I'd like my mother to pay for this, or I'd like my father to pay for this. But I'm sort of also wondering, in any other case, do you put yourself in the position of the victim in the same way, like Lacey Peterson? What would Lacey want me to do with Scott? I don't know if Lacey would want me to put Scott in jail. Maybe she would. And I don't know if your job is to put yourself in the victim's mind space to the extent that you say, well, the evidence then doesn't matter. I mean, I thought courtrooms were supposed to be scientific. I do think it's a very valid point. What would JONBENET want? I think that's a very valid point. But then why not say that from the beginning? Say, I don't know if JONBENET would want this to happen, so I'm not going to be involved in investigating this case. Because what I also don't think JONBENET would want to happen is for someone else who had nothing to do with what happened to her to be investigated and pursued and sued. I also don't think JONBENET would want someone like Detective Thomas, who really seemed to love her and seemed to dedicate his work to her, to lose his job because someone is playing kind of games. And that is where you sort of wonder, on the one hand, yes, that's a really beautiful sentiment. You know, what would JONBENET want? But on the other hand, aren't we being clouded? Aren't we being thrown a bone in terms of that sentiment? And then you forget about all these other things that were going on. Not only what would suit JONBENET, but what was actually suiting this district attorney and his pals.
I'm just not going to do that.
And he was true to his word. He didn't give in to the crowd. He didn't give in to all of that. And I don't know if I would say in a good way. I don't know what you would say. Do you think Alex Hunter not giving in to the crowd. When I think of the crowd in this case, I think of the Boulder community. I don't think of a lynch mob. I don't think of people running with pitchforks. I think of a community that's been lied to. And you know that Christmas star you see, when you come quite close to it, it's black in the middle, right? When you approach that Christmas star, the light frames the star, but the inside of that star is darkness. And that is in a way what this case was like. We will find the perpetrator here. I undertake to bring this perpetrator to justice, only not to do it. The gift, the Christmas gift in terms of this case, ended up just being the wrapping paper and the note. In other words, it's a promise to do something. It's a suggestion that something is happening in terms of the grand jury, but then what's inside that ends up being an empty box, empty promises.
And the media will have to take its share of the blame.
Is it our team against their team and you've got a better team?
Well, what I've learned is that there's no end to the vulgarity of journalism.
Have you got a team to go against the Ramseys?
I think journalists report the news that people want to see and hear. But a great disappointment is the fact that in view of all of the media attention paid and all the voyeuristic attention on the part of the public paid to it, in there is lost the real idea that a little girl was killed, and the investigation was impacted really to some extent by all of this undue attention paid to it.
We believe that.
So a question that does arise is, if there was no media attention to the JonBeNet Ramsey case, zero, would there have been the same result? And that is what I find probably the most shocking thing, is that, and I felt this with the Oscar Pistorius case as well, is that with the world watching, you would think justice will prevail. With the world watching, obviously common sense has got to prevail. And the horror is that with the world watching, with O.J. Simpson case, with this case, justice doesn't prevail. It's the opposite of a fairy tale. It's the Christmas fairy tale where instead of getting a gift and hope and love and peace for all mankind, you get a dead child. And the legacy of this case was also a dead child. The legal baby that this case was supposed to grow up into was also a dead child. It was something that grew to a point and then it was not allowed to continue any further.
America has lost the concept of presumption of innocence. We've been tasked with proving that we're innocent.
So what I find quite interesting, and he did this and Patsy did it as well, was to kind of grandstand in a way and talk about where I'm standing, what justice looks like in America. And Patsy even said it on the 1st of January 1997, that America's lost its way or something like that, and that something about the family has been destroyed in America in 1997. And in terms of the Ramsey case, instead what happened, instead of the presumption of innocence that he's talking about, you now have a presumption of guilt to virtually everybody. And you just heard it early on in this broadcast, where someone was saying, as soon as you say an intruder did this, it could literally be anybody in the entire world. It's not the Ramseys, literally anybody else besides them. So in other words, you have the presumption of guilt spread universally. And now everyone is guilty except the Ramseys. The Boulder police are guilty. This person could be guilty. The friends of the Ramseys could be guilty. Fleet White could be guilty. Just trying to think. His wife could be guilty. The guy who came to do Santa duty, he could be guilty. In other words, literally everyone can be guilty except the Ramseys, and he's talking about the presumption of innocence. We should be presumed innocent, but everyone else should be presumed guilty. Everyone else should be presumed at fault. And, he's totally right that there is a presumption of innocence, but there's a legal presumption of innocence. And that legal presumption of innocence means you are legally presumed innocent, but you can nevertheless be investigated if there's probable cause. And guess what? There was, which is why it went to a grand jury, and which is why the grand jury went the way that they went.
Innocent. And that shouldn't be.
The Ramseys are scheduled to meet with the Boulder police for the first time in 3 years in August 2000.
I do think the Ramseys benefited big time from a presumption of innocence that was totally irrational or totally out of the norm. In other words, they were given so much presumption of innocence, they were allowed to give their interviews 4 months later. When they wanted to talk to Patsy, like very early on, they said, well, she's too medicated to do that. And as a result of them being given this treatment, which is basically, okay, we'll presume that you're innocent, we'll give you a little bit of, a benefit of the doubt. Look where the Ramseys are today. Look where the Ramseys are 27 years later.
Chief Beckner has made some changes in the Boulder Police Department. He's added a crime scene processing unit, and police officers now carry a check sheet on what to do when a child is reported missing. The Ramseys have not been inside their Boulder home since JONBENET's body was found. The house is on the market.
In the blink of an eye, someone came into our home, not only killed our child, but killed everything that we had built and worked hard for to prepare for the future. It took a lot of people down with it.
What have you learned from the case?
There is a dynamic that develops. When you have a camera at your face and a microphone, somewhere else, you produce a soup that I think causes people to act in strange and bizarre ways.
If help and assistance is offered, take.
I must say that's such a strange statement to make for Alex Hunter. What did you learn from this case? And he talks about cameras being in your face. I learned to have cameras in my face, basically.
You can always put it in the closet, or you can always send them away. I think all of us who are committed to this case hope that the person or people who perpetrated this offense, some people find this cruel, but I hope it does eat at them, because I want people to come forward and say, I'm responsible and I need to be accountable for what I did, because the murder of a little girl should haunt people.
Okay, so we're going to go from that to this.
Again, June Menger, the murder victim's mother, on Alex Hunter.
I think he should resign.
But the pressing question today is, can District Attorney Alex Hunter rise to the current challenge of the Ramsey case? Again, ABC News consultant Vincent Bugliosi.
I'm sure he's an honorable person and he's interested in seeking justice in this case, but he's certainly not the stereotypical DA who's tough and hard-nosed, and you need an aggressive DA in a situation like this. And he apparently is not that type of person.
Which perhaps is why his critics say it took public protest to get the Ramsey case to a grand jury after nearly 2 years.
How's that? It took public protest to get this guy to actually even take the case to a grand jury after 2 years. He didn't want to do it, had to be pushed into doing it, and then there was a very clever little aftermath to that story, wasn't there?
Remember, a grand jury can compel reluctant witnesses to testify.
How unusual is it to wait that long to impanel a grand jury to investigate
It's
that?
highly unusual, particularly when you have two suspects and they're not cooperating with you. I mean, it's DA 101, that when you have two suspects, you do everything possible immediately to separate those two and not give them time for their stories to harden and to reconcile with each other. It's being done now, a year and a half later, but it's a little late in the day. Incompetence. Incompetence, right.
So I'm a little confused. I'm a little bit confused. Who's incompetent now? I think I missed something. Because I've heard for 27 years how incompetent the police were. Over and over again. Linda Arendt, blah, 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 right, incompetent. What do you never, ever hear in terms of incompetence? And I personally don't think it's incompetence. I think it's things like stubbornness. It's a chummy legal system. It's not accidentally incompetent. I think it's intentionally strategic. That's what it looks like. Unless maybe it is incompetence based on a lack of experience. And so are we talking about the lack of experience of the Boulder PD or the lack of experience of the Boulder District Attorney's Office that don't actually know how you take a case into a courtroom? How do you impanel a jury? Maybe I need to look that up in a book. I've never done it before.
Based on what we know right now, based on what our sources have told us is the evidence right now.
Right.
If they don't come up with anything more, is this the perfect murder?
Obviously, if they don't come up with enough evidence, then the perpetrators committed a perfect murder, yeah.
And now one more note in the case. This weekend, a detective who came out of retirement to help the district attorney try to solve the case resigned, saying he believes an intruder committed the crime. As for Steve Thomas, he now works as a carpenter. And the grand
So that is obviously a reference to Lou Smith, right? Lou Smith also resigned because he is absolutely certain that an intruder did this. What's also fascinating in terms of the Ramsey case is Alex Hunter's relationship with Lou Smith and Lou Smith's relationship with the Ramseys, right? And Lou Smith was hired by Alex Hunter to investigate the defense case. Let me say that again. Lou Smith wasn't just come and please figure out what happened here. Lou Smith was hired to investigate the defense case. And this is what Alex Hunter later said about him. By the way, the picture on screen is Gary Oliva in 2002.
As it turns out, we're not the only ones interested in Oliva. A Boulder police officer showed up to take notes.
I would be concerned if any lead was not fully taken to ground.
Now, isn't that an incredibly ironic statement to make? Alex Hunter saying, "Gee, I will be really worried if one lead isn't followed up." And then look at what happened with the grand jury indictments. How worried do you think he was about that?
Former Boulder District Attorney Alex Hunter says police tried to follow up on pedophiles, but
you must bear in mind this is a 2002 documentary. So in other words, he's now talking about Gary Oliva, and that is a possible lead, when he knows full well that the grand jury voted to indict the Ramseys on 4 charges. He knows that. And he's saying, you know what, I think they should actually follow up leads, for example, on Gary Oliva.
admits that early on, the force was clearly over.
Standard, when John Ramsey went onto court TV and he spoke about Gary Oliva, wouldn't that be the first thing you would say? I don't really think he's a suspect because, first of all, he was a suspect, and secondly, in 2002, and he was a suspect. He was ruled out as a suspect, and that there was no DNA there, and yet it becomes this big. The story I saw on Court TV got over 1 million views. That Gary Oliva wrote the ransom note, and he must have killed JONBENET. And it's that kind of thing that makes me have a feeling of hatred towards the media. Because if you are a lawyer and you are making stories about the law, and you should know better to know that they aren't true, then who isn't lying to one another? It's like, who are the good guys in the story? What I'm trying to say is, if you're in the true crime space, and just like people who cover up a crime, you are also misleading and manipulating, then we really are doomed. If people who've got a legal background are milking stories, and they know better that this is probably not a credible story, and these channels have got huge amounts. I've got a tiny amount of following, I'm a small boring channel, bleating, like crying out in the wilderness, and you've got these big channels, and why don't you know better? Have you just forgotten? Is it amnesia? Kind of what's going on?
A little bit.
I find that quite ironic, that it's kind of a throwing Lou Smith under the bus, because he hired Lou Smith, and Lou Smith kind of did a great job in terms of the defense. He came up with the, going into the basement, that whole thing. And as bad as the intruder theory is, it's nevertheless a counter narrative, right? It's a counter narrative. And I think it was Lou Smith who found photos where he said, well, there's no snow, right? And that was another contribution that Lou Smith made that was arguably of some value.
Hunter believes Smith, a devout Christian, crossed a line when working as a DA investigator. He prayed with the Ramseys.
Do you think maybe you've gotten too close to Ramses?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think I did. If the Ramseys did this and I found out, I'd be first one standing in line at the border.
So can you hear what he's saying? He's asked, do you think you got too close to the Ramseys? And I mean, he was praying with them, right? And when I think someone died, I'm not sure if it was his wife died, but the Ramseys would visit with Lou Smith, and Lou Smith would visit with them when they were in hospital, right? And the issue then becomes, did you know that Lou Smith was one of the investigators that was supposed to question the Ramseys, John and Patsy, during those major milestone interviews that they gave? Lou Smith was one of the investigators that was supposed to talk to them. Now, you could have had just anybody else. In other words, someone that isn't their friend and is just a neutral person asking questions, rather than someone who is basically in their corner. So you've got someone in their corner that is supposed to ask them questions. And we're going to deal with a couple of those questions in a moment. But how helpful is it having a guy who basically sympathizes with the Ramseys because they are church-going folk, and he's a church-going guy, and Patsy had cancer, and I think his wife had cancer as well. And, here we are in 2002. Even the district attorney says, I think the guy who hired him said, I think he was a little bit sentimentally biased towards the Ramseys. I mean, it's a dumb question. Should you have an investigator like that on your team? someone's a suspect, but I kind of like these people, so I'm going to be a little bit soft on them. Again, if you want a recipe to F up your case, this is how to go about it. And that brings us to the visit to the, where is it now? The visit to the star over Boulder. I'm going to take you through that in a moment. And these are kind of words from Lou Smith. We're going to go to the, I think it's the 1998 statement that Lou Smith gave. I just don't know why it's not downloading this. But anyway, yeah, you can see Lou Smith in action. Give me a second. Download. So I'm not quite sure why this is doing this. So I'm not sure why it's just not opening. It's a bit of a gremlin. So I'll just move it over like that. What I wanted to show you was this picture of Lou Smith. So there's Lou Smith interviewing John, and there he is at the Ramsey home, and there he is interviewing John. Do you have any ideas who this could be? Anyway, let's go back to the statement. Okay, so now it's finished downloading. Okay, so I'd rather open that document. So let's just go back to that. There it is. Okay, can you guys read that? So Lou Smith takes us via John Ramsey to Christmas Eve, and he says, so then Christmas Eve was at Pastor Jay's, and John Ramsey also had a business relationship with him. And then what happened? Just kind of and he's basically saying, take us through what happened on Christmas Eve. John says, well, yeah, I remember dropping Patsy off. I couldn't find a parking place right away. So I parked and came around, and they already had a table in the front room. I came in, we had dinner, the kids colored. I think we drove up to, after we left there, I think we drove to the Star. Might have driven a little bit to look at the lights. JONBENET was miffed because we wouldn't let her walk up to the Star because she had on her church dress, and you can't walk up there. Why did she have on her church dress? Ramsey, it was pretty good. She looked beautiful in church. It was a purple dress, and they wanted to get out of the car, I guess. We looked at everything. We turned around and came home. The kids went to bed. Now, I'm going to come back to this, but basically, I want to take you to this thing where I think we drove to the Star, and JONBENET was miffed because we wouldn't let her walk up to the Star because she had her church dress on. And I think he said something like, and anyway, you can't walk up there. And so let's have a look at what they're actually talking about. So that is a star in Austin. It's just interesting that in my journey through America, there was another star that I kind of encountered. Obviously, that's not relevant to the story, but nevertheless, it was relevant to my story. And that's the story I'll take you guys through tomorrow, the 26th. dealing with my journey through America. And so this was actually in Boulder a couple of days later, entering Boulder, and that was my first view of the Christmas star. There it is. And it's very, very close to the Ramsey home. The Ramsey home is kind of like there, right? It's 5 minutes drive from the Ramsey home to the Christmas star. And this star was actually also illuminated after that shooting that was in Boulder as a kind of a message of hope, right? But anyway, this is my first view of it coming into Boulder. And there you have some video just showing how there it is in the distance, and there's Boulder underneath it. And it is kind of magical. And this was quite a magical experience, approaching almost like the last stop in my journey covering the JONBENET Ramsey case. Thanks a lot, Kate. Thank you. And this is obviously coming a little bit closer. And there it is over there. And as I say, it was incredibly frustrating trying to photograph the star. The closer you got to it, the harder it was to see it. It seemed very elusive. I seem to remember when we were driving that I even said to Jean, it's quite amazing how the star kind of appears and disappears. You see it, and then there's darkness sort of passes over it, obviously from the trees. But just from the perspective of here I am, and I'm here expressly to see the star. And I've written a book with the name Christmas Star. I've written a trilogy of books, Black Star over Bethlehem. So it's got a particular significance to me. And so here I am after all this time, coming to the end of my journey, my second journey in America, because I don't think I ever saw the Christmas star. I didn't see that Boulder star when I first went to Boulder. There was a lot of smoke, and I really wasn't in Boulder very much. And so here I am at last, and I'm here to see the star, and it's sort of just out of reach. I know it's there, and I'm trying to get to it, and it's disappearing and it's reappearing, which is an incredible analogy to the Ramsey case. It's amazing how from this angle, the star comes and goes, you know, because of the trees. It disappears in the dark and then it reappears.
Yeah.
And so on our way to the star, we passed this restaurant, the Dark Horse, and there's quite a good view of the star from like the balcony of this bar and grill. And you really need to see Boulder at night, at Christmas time, just to get a sense of just how beautiful Christmas is in Boulder. It really is a fairy tale. And I've been through quite a few American towns over Christmas. Myrtle Beach was also quite magical in certain respects, kind of in a commercial way. But I must have found Boulder very much transformed. You know, it's already quite a magical place with the mountains and the trees and the rivers and the bicycles going along. And the folks put a lot of effort into decorating houses, beautiful houses and trees. And Christmas really feels quite beautiful in a place like Boulder. you know, obviously we have entire houses decorated with Christmas lights, right? And you've got beautiful buildings like this one in Boulder. And it just feels like a very magical place. So there you have this Christmas star above a decorated Christmas tree. This is outside, and a house that's totally decorated as well. Well, the outside.
Never been a photo op before.
So there we were literally trying to align this star with the top of this Christmas tree. And the strange thing, me looking at this now, is like, I can't believe how terribly it's captured on camera compared to how beautiful and immense that tree was. It's just so, it's disappointing how poorly you can capture things like this on camera, but it gives you at least a basic idea. And now we're starting to drive up out of the fabric of Boulder onto the flat irons to the substrate on which this Christmas star is attached. It seems to be floating, but it's obviously attached to the real world. And that's Boulder spread out. As you climb up towards the star, Boulder falls out below you. So this is the sort of thing that the Ramseys experienced with JONBENET in 1996. Driving from their home, having dinner, and then driving to Pastor Jay's, so going from Pastor Jay's to the Christmas Star. And we kind of did that in reverse. We went to the Christmas Star and then went to Pastor Jay's, and then then had some car trouble. Can you see how, from this perspective, the inside of that star is completely black? It's not the star that it seems to be from a distance. When you get closer to it, the star is completely black inside it, inside those lines. And then when you get even closer, then it is kind of a golden place. It's kind of illuminated. So over a period of time, that star changes from being a little prick, a little star that appears and disappears, to one that becomes like a black star, to one that takes you in its embrace. Thanks a lot, Kate. Appreciate it. As you get closer and closer, it seems to change, and you seem to change in a way as well. And so what we wanted to do from this point was drive around it and get a view of the star below us and Boulder even further, and we actually failed in that undertaking. But nevertheless, we did take this photo of Boulder. At this point, the star is below, but we couldn't quite line those up in that sense. I really like this picture. Can you see the moon over there? There's the moon, and it's trying to come out of the clouds. And you can see it's not a starry night. There's no stars. But the moon is trying to break through, and there's Boulder. it seemed like an appropriately dark night for what I was trying to do. And this is approaching the star again from basically from above, but coming kind of from the side. And this is drawing almost level with it, driving directly below it. So I remember the first time I went to Boulder, I actually did see the star, but I saw it in the day. This was the first time I was seeing it at night, and I sort of felt like I was at the very end of my trip through America. I was basically going to fly the next day to Denver, from Denver to Myrtle Beach to New York and home. And Myrtle Beach was basically just going to be relax and do nothing kind of thing. So this was like the very last thing that I wanted to do in the true crime sense. I wanted to go to the star that JONBENET was miffed because she wasn't allowed to go there. And I wanted to kind of go there as someone who's told her story so many times. And when you write in this spot here, it's so close by. It's literally just over there, right? And then what's quite crazy is you can't park your car right at this spot. There is not only no parking on the left side, but a little bit further on where there is parking, all of that parking had been cordoned off and they'd said no parking because they didn't want people to stop there and they didn't want people to do what I was about to do. Because there's a little bit of a safety issue involved, right? Climbing up, there's no path, it's dark. I really don't know why they don't make a path to the star, but there it is. It seems like they want that star to be kind of untouched, unvisited, that they don't want people to go there, right? But I wanted to go there. So this was very close to the star, and I couldn't believe how difficult it was to get there. It seemed like just over there, and it was extremely steep. And because there was no path, there was a lot of deep grass and branches and foreign objects, rocks and things. You really stumbled your way to get there. And at least 3 times I thought, this is just too far and it's much harder. I think I'm going to go back, because I could fall. It's actually a lot steeper than it looks. That star is like at an angle, which is why you can see it from so far away. Now you're climbing up against that angle and at night, right? And so it suddenly felt kind of not something that I actually did want to do after all. It was hard, it was difficult. But then I did eventually get there, and I was totally out of breath when I did get there. And then I took some of these photos. And as I say, when you are there, obviously you feel like you're within its golden embrace, right? I must say, I'm surprised I don't sound more out of breath than that. So, that's the look. If you leaned against one of the struts, that's what you see directly above you. And there's a light bulb that's missing there and one there that's not working. As you can see, it is pretty heavy duty. Yeah, it definitely was. I hope you guys are appreciating the effort it took to get there. Can I rotate this? Unfortunately not, but it's quite a nice little pan from the start to Boulder. And so this must be, and I mean, this star is associated with Christmas. It's turned on during Christmas time, in the run up to Christmas. It was on in like late November when I was in Colorado. And it's probably the biggest Christmas decoration of its kind in the world, a Christmas star. And it was quite nice going up to it. What Jean later told me that I thought was quite interesting is she said, because Boulder's a student town, this star's got special significance for the students, and they will, some of them will go there and actually have sex in the middle of the star, and just to be able to say that they did. And I don't know, I found something very charming about that. That imagine if your first sexual experience or one of your sexual experiences was in the star. And although it, in some ways, it's must be quite a sweet memory. Having climbed it myself, you would have to, your partner would have to be quite committed, and you probably need a good blanket to cover over the grass and other things. But I thought it was quite a interesting way that other people might think of this star. And this is now having come down and left. There's the area that is totally cordoned off. If you wanted to park here, you can't, with a view to climbing up to the star because it's cordoned off, there you can see. And of course, I found all of this incredibly triggering based on my knowledge of the Ramsey case and the emblem that the star was, that the star that represents to me so much of the Ramsey case, star area closed, no entry. And that has been how the Ramsey case has felt like, that it's something that welcomes you. I'm talking about the star, and yet when you get to it, it won't let you get any closer. And the Ramsey case is a lot like that as well. Not that it welcomes you, but that it pretends to be something that it's not, and it won't let you in, right? The unfortunate aftermath of this was after climbing to the star. It was a very, very cold night, and I just started coughing, and I just wouldn't stop. I kind of had, so I was kind of normal up to this point, and then I kind of started coughing, and I just could not stop. And we basically drove from there to find the nearest pharmacy, and I literally coughed from the time that I came back from the star till when I took cough mixture. That's how bad it was. It was like a coughing fit. And, some of you know this. I actually had very bad COVID about a month earlier, about the 23rd of October, 23rd of October. And then by around about a month later, I had a secondary infection, and this was this secondary infection still doing its thing. And what I didn't mention, when I climbed up to the star, I could just feel my heart beating in my chest, like really, really hard. And I realized how weakened my body had become in this effort, and to such an extent that I was thinking, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm going to do this. It's so taxing. And then, as you know, I obviously did do it. You can see from this angle, you've got quite an amazing contrast of light and darkness. The light is bright. The inside is also golden. And you've got the shadows of these trees blocking out the light from this angle. And so the sign here is saying, see the star from afar, don't go up to it. In other words, almost like saying to an investigator, don't look beneath the surface. Don't go in depth. Keep your distance. Keep your distance. Also, with the Ramsey case, grand jury's done, case closed. Case is closed. But actually, there was a lot more to the story when you made the effort. So from here, as I say, we left. I went and got something, some cough medicine, and then we went into the Pearl Street Mall area, which is where Pastor Jay's is, and where you see a lot of these lights. There you can see a car is passing underneath the star. It gives you an idea of the scale of it. The parking area is kind of over here, but which was kind of closed off. If I remember correctly, we were now driving via the Ramsey home, and obviously that's also something you want to see at night, is just how many windows there are in the Ramsey home. And I think we had actually just passed the Ramsey home here, and obviously now it's just dark. It's just woods. And that's also like the dark star in Boulder. This house that used to be whatever it was is now very dark. It's just woods, lots of trees surrounding the house. And then we went around the back of the house. And that's an area that very few people think about, is that alleyway. And here it is. Merry Christmas, Tony. So the Ramsey home is over here. In complete darkness on this particular night. To me. Okay. It's coming out the alleyway and turning around. And now this is the Pearl Street area. And as I say, what's so frustrating here is you simply can't get a photo of the Christmas star anywhere down here. Sometimes you see it for a very brief moment and then it disappears again. So just once again, look what a beautiful town Boulder is. I think Moscow, Ida, is also a very pretty little town. Even in winter, like even in ordinary winter time. I think the Christmas star might be sort of over here. Oh no, that's just a reflection. So that is the Christmas lights from a distance. And they obviously get more and more more and more pretty. Again, it's not quite capturing the atmosphere the way I remembered it. You know, the star is sort of somewhere over here. There it is. And gone again. And it should be coming out here, but you just can't see it. You see what I mean? You just catch a very rare glimpse of it when you're in this particular street, here and there. Okay, and so now we're approaching the Pearl Street walkthrough area. There's 15th Street. Alec Baldwin actually gave a speech in that cinema. And so there you get a sense of just how pretty the center of town is. Look at all of these lights. And I must say I found it quite ironic that the courthouse was one of the most beautifully lit of all. Look at that, courthouse, happy holidays. They certainly don't spare any expense to get in with the Christmas spirit, do they? Quite pretty, right? And obviously this would be where the trial would have occurred if it had ever happened, in this building covered in lights. It was a really, really cold night, and we ended up not even making it to Pastor Jay's. And Jean's car broke down, so it was not, and I was like coughing like hell, so it was not terribly good. But the trip to the star was definitely quite moving. And there you can see the moon's trying to break out through the thin layer of clouds. Okay. Something else I meant to just address in yesterday's, I brought something up yesterday where I said the FBI don't investigate murders. Obviously they do, but the point of the FBI is to investigate serious crimes and crimes that require special expertise, like missing persons cases, kidnappings, fugitives. That's what the FBI investigate. The FBI won't necessarily investigate, let's call it, the average murder. That is really what the police would normally do. But if it's a very unusual situation requiring specialized resources, if it's considered a very serious case, then they might. And yeah, they, on the FBI's website, they give a description of what they do. And there it is. We concentrate on crime problems that pose major threats to American society. And there you have it. So although I was saying they won't investigate a murder, they will if it's something like a serial killing, if it's something that requires substantial resources, right? Okay. What else did I want to share with you guys? I wanted to share some snow photos. So I'll get to those in a second. Let's finish up with this dialogue, with this conversation between Lou Smith and John. So he says, I was the Christmas Eve was at Pastor Jay's, and then what happened? We went to the Christmas Star. Can you see how detailed his memory is? Right. This interview, I think, was 1998, and he says, I couldn't find parking right away. He remembers that. He says, I parked, came around, they're already at a table in the front room. He remembers that. He says, JONBENET was miffed because we wouldn't let her walk up to the Star because she had on her church dress. He remembers that. He remembers that she was wearing a purple dress. And then he's asked, he says, after everything, we turned around and went home and the kids went to bed. At this point, Lou Smith asked an important question. On the day before JONBENET died, what time did the kids go to bed? And then he says, I don't remember. It was dark. He remembers that it was dark when the kids went to bed. Let me just repeat what I've said here. He can remember dropping Patsy off. He can remember that they couldn't find a parking space. He can remember that he parked and came around. He can remember that there's a table in the front room. He can remember that the kids colored at the restaurant. He can remember that they drove to the Star. He can remember that JONBENET was miffed because they wouldn't let her walk up to the Star. He can remember that she was wearing her church dress. He can remember that she looked beautiful in church. He can remember that it was a purple dress. And then when he's asked, oh, what time did the kids go to bed? I don't remember. I remember it was dark. Then he says, I don't specifically remember the kids going to bed, but I'm sure they went to bed fairly early. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. So what was the ritual when you had Christmas? Well, we'd get up, we'd haul the presents and put them under the tree. And a lot of the things were not wrapped, so the kids had the surprise when they came down. And we put those out and we got the bike. So where would you keep these bikes, right? I don't have Christmas Star as a printed book. I don't have it as a printed book, so I actually don't have a copy myself. But I'm not going to read out of Christmas Star now, but maybe later on. But thanks for the question, Stephanie. So now he's asked, John, where would you keep the bikes? And John says, they were usually in the basement. And then he says, that's Patsy's department, but I think she kept them in that cellar room. And so in terms of the poll question, what is the answer? Where were the presents typically kept? What do you think is the answer? I hope you guys have voted. So where did the Ramseys normally store the Christmas presents? At a neighbor's home. That wasn't what they normally did, but they did this with JONBENET's bike, so that's partially right. Where did the Ramseys normally store the Christmas presents? In the garage. That's where they stored Patsy's bicycle, so also partially right. Where did the Ramseys normally store the Christmas presents? Basement is correct, but it was specifically in the wine cellar. 22% of you got that right. So well done to, if you said the wine cellar, you're right. And now, do you remember what I said a little while ago? I said, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. I hope I'm going to be able to come back to this in the right way. So remember, I introduced the message, the narrative tonight by saying that Christmas is like a pageant, and that Christmas involves an intruder coming in the house, in the form of Santa Claus, and obviously for the benefit of children, you want to suggest that Santa was here without him being here. So you might leave out milk and cookies. You might say, I'm leaving that door open, or let's take this away from the chimney. In other words, you want to imply to your children that Santa is coming, and this is the route that he's going to take. And we need to go to sleep now so that Santa can come in. But in other words, Santa is an intruder, and he's someone that doesn't really necessarily leave a lot of evidence, but he does leave a note. He doesn't. You do know that Santa's been there because he's left a note, right? Then also, what's part of Christmas is hiding gifts away, especially when you've got young children. Gifts are hidden away, right? Think about this crime scene in the Ramsey case. It also involves a note and things that are hidden away. Now think about the fact that in the Ramsey case, which happens over Christmas, the gifts have been stored all along, hidden all along in the wine cellar from their own children in their own home. And that is in the end where JONBENET is hidden, in the wine cellar in the family home, right? And who would know about that? Well, on the one hand, the Ramseys would know that that could be a hiding place because that's where they hid the gifts. And so did the Ramseys look for JONBENET in the room where they would hide the gifts, right? Did the Ramseys look for JONBENET in the wine cellar when they were looking for JONBENET, right? And the next thing is, would an intruder, of all the places in the Ramsey home, would he commit the crime in that room compared to any other room, or taking JONBENET out the house, which I would think would be the best thing to do? You would think an abductor's best strategy would to get out the house, not kind of set up camp in the house, right? Do you follow? Thanks a lot. I'm glad you're following what I'm saying. So let's now go back to where we were. What's interesting here is that John says, he's asked now about this. We'd get up, we'd haul the presents and put them under the tree, right? What's quite interesting is he doesn't say we'd haul the presents up out of the basement and put them under the tree. He doesn't say that, but that's exactly what he is saying. But he doesn't say that. He says we'd haul the presents. From where? From the basement. From where in the basement? From the wine cellar room in the basement. And a lot of the things were not wrapped, so the kids had the surprise when they came down. Now, if you think about what he's saying there, he seems to be saying a lot of the gifts weren't wrapped. Really? Do you believe that? Do you believe that a lot of the gifts weren't wrapped? Because I want to show you a picture. I want to show you a picture. It's taking so long. Sorry, it just loses a bit of the momentum whenever I do this, but that's one image. And can you see unwrapped gifts there besides the bicycles? Can you see unwrapped gifts? I see a gift that's wrapped, 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 and so on and so on and so on. Also, do you think Patsy Ramsey is the kind of person who would put up candy canes, Christmas trees in every room, go to all of this effort, go to all the effort to hide the gifts, only not to wrap them? Right? And so John makes the case here that, let's go back to that, where he says, we'd haul up the presents and a lot of the things were not wrapped, so the kids had the surprise when they came down. Now, he seems to be saying the kids would come down and the gifts were simply not wrapped at all. Guess what? There's a gift in the same room where JONBENET was found deceased, where the wrapping had been torn, where it looked like someone had gone down there and torn the wrapping to see what this gift was. And that gift was very likely a gift for Burke Ramsey. It looked like a Scalextric set. If Cotton Star was here, you could tell us exactly what it is, but I can see it in my mind, but it was a particular thing for cars to sort of race on. And the wrapping of that had been partially torn away. So something that's even still in the basement is already wrapped. And John is saying here, we'd haul the things out and they were not wrapped. Do you think that that is, yeah, that's right. I think there's also Lego. Do you think what John is saying here is true, that there was a lot of the things were not wrapped? Maybe one or two things weren't wrapped. Do you think it's true that a lot were not wrapped? Well, so would you say a lot of their gifts were wrapped? Or a lot of their gifts were not wrapped? And that's also maybe a reason why we've seen so few photos of the Ramsey Christmas, because you can bet your bottom dollar that a lot of photos were taken. Why have we not seen those photos? Just trying to see. If I can get to those downloads. Where is it? Do you see any? Gifts there that are wrapped or not wrapped? How about there? You see any gifts that are not wrapped? There's a gift that's wrapped. There's a gift that's wrapped. There's a gift that's wrapped. There's another one. There's another one. See what I'm saying? So it's on really a very simple point. Maybe Lou Schmidt could have asked for a little bit more clarity in terms of where he says things were not wrapped. And so I think another interesting question could be, what happened to the wrapping paper if things were wrapped, if Christmas gifts were wrapped and there were Christmas cards, what happened to those? And I wouldn't be surprised if with the book Mindhunter, that sort of thing got taken from the crime scene by Pam Paul, right? And that would have been quite interesting because you could have inventoried the Christmas gifts in a very clear way. Who got what? Because today, 27 years later, there's a bit of a lack of clarity on exactly what gifts were received and given. And for example, do you know what gifts John got? And for example, did you know that John was given a painting by Patsy? And paintings do come with things like duct tape on the backing sometimes. But this is the question that they are addressing here. Where would you keep these bikes? Right? And now this is addressing the question of how many bikes are there and whose bikes are they? And so he says they were usually in the basement, but I think she kept them in the cellar room, right? We usually keep all of our Christmas stuff in there, right? We keep all of our Christmas gifts hidden in the wine cellar, the place where JONBENET was hidden. Then he says, so you think that somebody would have gone down to get those? In other words, John, do you think someone went down Christmas Eve, went down into the basement, went down into the cellar room and came out, went into the cellar room, came out, went in and came out repeatedly with things that were hidden away, gifts that were hidden away, gifts that were wrapped somewhere and then brought up. And then he's asked, John, did you go down there? Meaning, John, did you go down to the basement and into the wine cellar? And John says, I don't remember. I don't remember if I did. Now, let's go back a little to this one. Lou Smith's asking John about Christmas Eve, and he says, just take me kind of through Christmas Eve. And John's got a lot to say. Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. Next question. 1, 2, 3 lines. Next question. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. And John remembers dropping Patsy off. He remembers I couldn't find a parking space. He remembers parking and I came around and I already had a table in the front room. This is of a restaurant. I came in, we had dinner and the kids colored. I remember that JONBENET was miffed and she was wearing a purple dress. John, can you remember going into the basement and there's a wine cellar where you kept all the gifts? No, I can't really remember that. John, can you remember when the kids went to bed? I don't remember that. I remember it was dark. Can you see how in certain areas that aren't important, he's got an incredibly detailed memory. And in the areas that are really important, he doesn't seem to remember things very well. Do you see that? So now we come to this section here. Do you think that somebody would have gone down there? John, did you go down there I don't remember specifically. And so Lou Smith, who's kind of on the Ramsey side anyway, who's kind of sympathetic towards him, he prays with them. Even the district attorney says, yeah, he was kind of maybe, could have been a bit more professional. Here he is interviewing John Ramsey on very important information. And even he says, kind of think about that, please. I'm asking you about this room. Kind of think about that. In other words, can you answer the question? Can you try and put a bit of effort into it? Because it's kind of important. Can you see that? He says, did you go down there? Did you go down to the basement and the cellar room, which is where JONBENET was found? And he says, I don't specifically remember. And then Luce says, that's kind of important. Who was in the basement close to the time of Christmas? What do you think John says after that? So John has said, I don't really remember, and Lou says, try harder. What do you think happens next? he says the following. Kind of think about it. Who was in the basement close at the time? John says, well, certainly we both would have been, because Patsy did most of her wrapping down there. But John has just said that most of the gifts weren't wrapped. Did you catch that? He said a lot of the gifts weren't wrapped, and then we went and looked at the photos and saw that quite a lot of the gifts were wrapped. Now he's saying Patsy was down there because she had to wrap the gifts. Okay, that makes sense. And then he says, we both would have been down there, and it was in the process of getting ready for Christmas. That would certainly have been down there and been in there, meaning present stuff. The only thing I remember is going over to Joe's and getting the bike out of his garage. And then after Patsy went downstairs, I had her bike in our garage and got that out and put it by the tree. And then I went upstairs. Lou Smith says, so both bikes then were at the tree. And so in this part of the story, there are two bikes in the story. Patsy's bike and JONBENET's bike, right? And then he says, this may not be exactly the time to interject, but did you get a painting for Christmas? Yeah, that's right. Tell me about that. Now look at the detail again. It was a painting of some boats at anchor that Patsy had seen in, I think, a local art store. It was done by a local Boulder artist. And she had got me that for Christmas, which we were going to take it up to our college in Michigan. It was behind the couch. So he remembers that very, very clearly. And then they continue. Now, the part that is quite interesting here is, and unfortunately I don't have it here. I thought I would have it, but I don't, is where he's asked, what about Burke? So there's a bike for Patsy and there's a bike for JONBENET, and he even says that he had a bicycle. So it's John has a bike, Patsy has a bike, and JONBENET has a bike. And then they say Burke wasn't getting a bike because it was his birthday. We were going to give him a bike later that year. Well, it can't be later that year because it was the end of the year. But what he means is they were going to give him a bike later on. What I've been trying to show you with some of this imagery is you can get so caught up in the Christmas spirit in Boulder. It's so beautiful. It's such a fairy tale. Everything is perfect. And what if you're a little boy, you're 9 years old, and you're so caught up in that? Because Burke, I think, did go up to the Christmas star. He did scramble up to it. And JONBENET was miffed because she wasn't allowed to, because she was dressed in a nice dress. And that made it extra miffing, is the fact that Burke could go up to it, but not her. And what happens if 3 members of your family get a bicycle and you don't? Or let's say your sister gets a bicycle and you don't, a brand new bicycle. In a community that's about bicycles, in a Christmas thing that's all about extravagance and everyone getting everything they want, but he doesn't get a bicycle. Even his mother gets a bicycle. Isn't he going to feel very left out? And again, now's a good time to talk about that. You might not have gotten a gift that you thought you were going to get, right, from somebody. You may have kids where one of the kids was disappointed because another kid got something. And it's quite a profound disappointment within the spirit of everyone being happy and having everything they want and the way they want it. And can that lead to someone being particularly upset, even crying? Well, I've gotten comments now from people saying that they've got kids that are very upset because they're eating a lot of sugar and they didn't get exactly what they wanted. That's a normal Christmas, right? The last thing I want to do is read from the Ramsey's book, The Death of Innocence, and I want to read just from their account. It says here, Christmas Day. Can you see that? Christmas Day, 1996. And you can see I've written there clear skies ? And I'm just going to read kind of an excerpt from this. Let's just take this away. Let's just see if I can put up a better image instead of that one. Maybe just put this one up. Or shall I just do it like this? Let's just do it like that. It's not the most Christmassy image, but anyway. So it says here, a few flakes of snow drifted over the mountains towering over Boulder, as multicolored lights sparkled in houses up and down the streets well before the first rays of sunlight broke on December 25th. And so what he's talking about here was that it was snowing on Christmas. Not a lot, but it was nevertheless snowing on Christmas. That's what he's saying here. And I've already played clips of Patsy saying there was no snow. The first line in their book is saying that there was a little bit of snow. And obviously this is Christmas Day. We really want to know about the snowing conditions on the day after Christmas. But in their own book, they're saying that they witnessed flakes of snow falling at night on Christmas Day. Is it possible that some flakes of snow fell the next night? A thin curtain of darkness still hung over 15th Street when our 9-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter bounded up the back stairs to our third bedroom. So they get up at the same time. And Loosmit has asked, what time did they go to sleep? And it would also be interesting to know, where did the kids sleep that night, Christmas Eve? Where did the kids sleep? John Ramsey said during his interview with CNN on the 1st of January, he said that they went to check Burke's room. Immediately after finding JONBENET was missing, they went to check Burke's room. He said, because sometimes she sleeps in there. And then the kids shouted, come on, wake up, it's Christmas. Burke says, yeah, we got to see what Santa brought for us. Hurry up. He says the previous year on Christmas Eve, Burke had gone to bed at the normal time, but then gotten up at 12:30 a.m. ready to open presents. In other words, Burke was very eager, perhaps over-eager, to know exactly what he got. And Burke was not sleeping properly as a result of that. We tried to explain then that Santa was still working his way across the country. He's probably just now in Georgia. In other words, this idea of telling someone about a fictional person that is doing certain fictional things and trying to leave fictional evidence behind as well. This is the first page of their book. He's probably just now in Georgia. You must be sound asleep until morning to make sure he stops by. We were doing much better this year since the kids waited until 6:30 a.m. to rouse us. Be careful, guys, Patsy said. What are the first two lines of the ransom note? Patsy got up and moved towards her bathroom at the other end of the master suite. I slipped out of bed and went down the 2 flights of stairs to the living room where Santa had left his surprises. Santa had left the surprises. Santa had come into the house and left things behind, including written notes, while everyone was sleeping. When I was a child, my dad would keep my brother Jeff and me waiting in great anxiety while he plugged in the tree, put Christmas records on the hi-fi, and set up the movie camera and floodlights to record the events of the morning. I couldn't stand all that waiting then. And so his family tradition was to record everything, to take photos, to record footage. Now, here I was doing exactly the same things to my kids in exactly the same way, making them wait when they were so excited. The kids still believed in Santa. Why shouldn't they? Then he says, last night had been no different. We had made several trips to the basement where Patsy kept the wrapped gifts stashed away. He doesn't say where. Then she had arranged them under the fat Fraser fir, which had reached to the ceiling of our living room. JONBENET had outgrown her training bike. A bigger bicycle had been on her wish list, and we would now look forward to some family bike trips together. Family bike trips. JONBENET on her bicycle, Patsy on her bicycle, me on my bicycle, Burke on his older bicycle. All Burke really wanted this year was a Nintendo 64 game system. That's all he wanted. He didn't want anything else. Do you think that's true? Do you think Burke only wanted one thing? Do you think JONBENET only got a bicycle? And so on the next page, he talks about mommy getting a new bicycle. And so on and so on. So you're going to have to take my word for it that that John basically said that Burke was going to get a bicycle later on. That was what they planned to do. And it's something we're not clear on, but it looks like there could have been 3 bicycles. A bicycle for John, a bicycle for Patsy, and a bicycle for JONBENET. And in a situation like that, how would Burke have felt? No, well, Burke, you're going to get a bicycle on your birthday, right? But that's also why it is unfortunate that we don't have more clarity on the gifts that were given to the Ramseys. Because 27 years later, did John get a bicycle? Because somewhere in the interview, I think he talks about 3 bicycles. Lou Smith talks about 3 bicycles. So it was either JONBENET and Burke that got a bicycle and Patsy, or everybody except John. It's either John or Burke that didn't get a bicycle. Which one is it? And that's kind of a critical piece of evidence, isn't it? Isn't that a critical piece of evidence? Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is the footprints in the snow. And what they made a big deal about was they said there was no footprints on these walkways, right? No footprints over here. But the important part is if you're saying there's an intruder, then if there's snow there and you can see there's shadow there, there's snow there, then there need to be footprints in that snow. If you're getting out of this grate, can you see that? If you're getting out of this grate, which you can barely see there, then there would be snow there, and I've got a picture of that snow, and it wouldn't matter if there's no footprints yet. The question is there any impression over here? Right? So can you see it's a bit of a manipulation to talk about the walkways having no snow when the critical question is, if you're saying that the access point was that grate, then the question would be, number one, is there snow around that grate? And I've seen photos of snow around that grate. And were there footprints in the snow around that grate, right? That's the critical question. And if you've said that's where I think the crime happened, then that's where you want to check for footprints. That's where you want to check for evidence. And investigators later saw that the top of that grate was covered in spider webs, the top of the grate. So you would imagine that those spider webs would have been pulled apart when you lifted the grate. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to just finally take you guys through some of these photos that I've got here. Before I forget, so this was sent to me by Cotton Star. Can you see what's happening here is, this is, where's the date? April 1997. The decision to provide John and Patsy Ramsey's attorneys with the December 26 police reports is unusual and may influence investigators' interviews with the couple, legal experts said Tuesday. An investigator would not ordinarily disclose what he knows to a suspect he's preparing to interrogate, because it allows a suspect to tailor his story to the facts that are known to the police, said Mimi Wesson, a law professor at the University of Colorado. So in the very first analysis I think we did, I said, this is a bizarre case. It's got a ransom note, and this is bizarre, and that's bizarre. That bizarreness never ended. The way that the Boulder DA treated this case and allowed certain things to happen was also bizarre. And I think in a weird way, that explains the entire case, the word bizarre. The bizarreness isn't by mistake. And I don't think you just go, it's bizarre, I don't understand it. If you understand that bizarreness, I think you understand what really happened here. Detectives began requesting official interviews with the Ramseys shortly after their 6-year-old daughter was found in the basement. Investigators interviewed the couple on December 26, according to a letter from the Ramseys' attorney to Boulder County District Attorney Alex Hunter. On April 21st, the family lawyers obtained police statements discussing the Ramsey statements. The interview they're talking about is a proper interview where the police have got all the evidence, all the files, all the information, and they've decided this is what we need to know, not casually asking questions. Where did you find the ransom note lying? What time was this? Oh, I'm taking a note here. That's not an official interview. When the Ramseys are kind of saying, well, we were asked questions on the 26th when the police arrived, that was the official interview. That wasn't an official interview. A formal police interrogation may benefit the parents, said David Kaplan, if they're innocent, right? The worst it can do is not provide any more useful information. Investigators suddenly cancelled separate interviews with the couple last week after the FBI concluded, the FBI that apparently aren't part of this investigation at all, concluded the conditions would not facilitate an effective interrogation. Negotiations concerning police questioning continue, said Hunter, who recently identified the Ramseys as the focus of the investigation. Anyway, let's have a look at some of these photos I've got here. Can you see on this particular image looks like little indentations in the, I think it's the kitchen door, and it was thought either Intruder did that or Burke did that Burke was playing with the wood paneling of the door. But it was found to be possibly suspicious. Why is there damage to the wood of this door? Then what's quite interesting with the basement door is the sort of way that it was secured with a kind of DIY, not a lock, but a kind of DIY thing. Well, that would make it impossible for a child to get in. Do you agree? It's behind that door that the Ramseys kept the Christmas gifts, right? Now, if you had a key or whatever, you could open that door, right? This door, presumably a normal door like that, you could open or close or lock or unlock with a key. But this at the top there would keep it secure. And this was the room that was kept secure from the children using that little thing. And that was the same thing that basically defeated Officer French. He went into the basement kind of late, early in the morning, and tried to open the door, and it wouldn't open, and he presumed it was locked because of this. What I want to do is compare this thing that you see here. So first of all, let me just ask you a question. What would you call this? What name would you give that thing that you're seeing in the picture? Do you know what? Okay, there you have it. Okay. I must say I prefer thought criminal's word, and I also prefer Zircon's word. But for all intents and purposes, most people think of it as a garrote. And remember, I've said so often, if the first note is wrong, it'll ruin the whole symphony. Well, if you get the name of whatever that thing is wrong, it's going to ruin the whole symphony, right? So what you see, there's a stick with a piece of string on it, right? Now, a garrote tends to look like this. A garrote tends to look like that. It's got a stick on the one side and a stick on the other side, right? That's a classical garrote. It could also have a loop on the one side and a loop on the other side. But that is not what you're seeing in that picture. That is a garrote. What you're seeing here is a stick with, on the other end is a loop. A stick, and on the other end is a loop, and a thing similar to that. Is that a garrote? Is that thing you're seeing on screen, is that a garrote? So this thing that has been said for years, that what happened to JONBENET, a garrote was used. Are you using the right word to describe that thing? Because in this book, it's a book, the Boy Scout Handbook, is something that kind of looks quite similar to that and this and this, right? It's in this book, Boy Scout Handbook, and if you turn to chapter 6, you see kind of sticks and I guess wooden things. And then there's like nylon string or nylon rope that it's bound with. So to stick with nylon around it. And then look at what happens when you go through this. It shows various ways. Look at that string over there. Can you see that string? Various ways of tying string, right? And then various ways of tying string onto a stick, like over there. And over here, you see something quite similar. You see a stick and that thing coming out at right angles, right? There's some more of it going on. And the idea is you can hold on to that and pull someone up from below. You can pull heavy things. You can pull things like that. So it goes on chapter after chapter. And then you also see this. You see this kid over here. And if you look carefully, it's a stick with that coming out of it, right? But it's also known as, I think, a commando hitch. In other words, it's a stick with a loop. Sorry, a stick that is tied with a particular kind of knot that then connects to a loop, and that loop you can wrap around something that you need to tighten, or something that's quite heavy, that if you were bent over it might be quite difficult to pull over a distance. And And so just on that simple question, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a garrote, or are we dealing with something that was designed actually to be something else? And that's quite an important question, because a garrote is something that is designed to kill someone. A garrote is designed to strangle a person, whereas that thing in the scout, the scout context, isn't designed to kill anyone. It's designed for moving things. It's designed for other things, put it that way. So here I've got another scout book, and it's from the 90s. And I just want to see if I can find images of knots in this particular book. K, E, F, G, H, I, K. So if you look in the index, I don't know if you can see that, this whole section from there deals with knots. All of that deals with knots, all of that. Let me just show you again. This entire section here, all of this is knots. This whole box, this whole section here is dealing with knots. This section there is dealing with knots. And it's knots like floor lashing, half hitch, round lashing, shear bend, square knot, square lashing, taut line hitch, timber hitch. What do you think a timber hitch is? If you just think about your knowledge of English, what do you think a timber hitch is? So let's go to page 1112 that refers to a timber hitch. Okay, so that's a quiz. Let's go to 138. And a timber hitch is exactly what you'd think. It's string around a stick, I guess. There's a square lashing. Some more of that. Some more examples of all of that going on. More. Bowline knot, sheep bend, and so on. And so what I'm trying to get at is the intruder narrative invokes a garrote, right, which wasn't even made in the house, right? So what you can say about this particular device was it was made in the house, right? Do we agree with that? It was made in the house. But it doesn't really look like a classical garrote because it's only got one loop. I suppose you could argue that on the one end is a stick and on the other end is a loop, and in that sense you could use it as a loop, but that doesn't really work because the looped end is around JONBENET's neck. So was whatever happened to it, did it happen using one hand? Well, then it's not a classic use of the device, right? The other thing that's quite strange is, yeah, you can see someone wearing bloomers that are size 12. Now, the thing that's strange is they're talking about you need to check the DNA, the unknown male DNA on the bloomers, right? But the bloomers had been taken out of new packaging. And so I'd be surprised if you'd even find JONBENET's DNA really on these bloomers. And so why is the focus on these bloomers and not on her other clothing? And not on the ransom note and not on the duct tape and all the other things? The bloomers were part of staging. So why are you asking the staging item? Why are you wanting the staging item to be tested for DNA when the staging item was very likely used because it didn't have DNA on it? So anyway, I've gone through quite a few of these Boys Life magazines just to get a sense of what a boy's life would have been. I've tried to do the same with JONBENET. What was it like being a little girl at that time? What was on television? What was in the movies? And that is not what the garrote looked like either. It didn't have two loops. It had a stick attached to it with a particular kind of knot that not everyone would know about. But this is kind of the bottom line when it comes to the, thanks a lot, Deborah. They do, don't they? Thank you. This is what I'm getting at when I talk about the snow, is it doesn't matter whether there was snow in the walkways or not. It matters if there was snow there, right? And in this image, you can see that there was snow there on this particular day. The question is, was there snow there? You can see there's more snow here than there is there. So anyone making the argument about snow or no snow here, it's totally pointless. If you said that this is the access point, then the question is, where's the footprints in the snow here? And if there had been footprints made, let's say the day before, why are they not there now? So I think this photo was taken like the next day or the day after. Why is there no footprints there still? And you might say because snow has fallen on top of it. But you can see footprints here. Why is there no footprints there? And in that respect, I want to just show you a few photos that that Jean Karras took. Where are they? She took them this morning, and these are all of snow. Right? And that is a kind of a combination of snow and frost. So think about what we're dealing with. It's the same time of the year. Christmas, Boulder, same area, Boulder. And you can leave footprints without there even being snow there. I don't know if you can see that. There's a footprint right over there, and the snow is incomplete, and this is on the ground, right? In other words, you are going to see footprints if feet have moved over there. And Jean was saying there's a combination of snow and frost. We really need to talk to Jean to kind of get this, but there you kind of just get an idea of the conditions on the ground in Boulder at Christmas time. And I don't think you can say there was no snow. I just don't think that that is accurate. There's another view of the snow. And there's a view of snow and a walkway. And as I said, the important thing to bear in mind here is it doesn't matter about the walkways, it matters that area right in front of the grill. And just on that alone, I think the police could have made their case. If that part was just handled better and dealt with earlier on, that could have made the case. That could have dealt with the intruder narrative once and for all, right? Knickers, okay. The last thing I want to say is, by the way, this is a beautiful image by Grant Collier of the Flatirons near Boulder. Can I make this really huge? Let's do it like that. Remember in the last episode, the last analysis I did, I was saying why the Ramsey case is so important is it addresses this idea of ultimately, do we live in a world that's worth fighting for? Is there good in the world, right? And you're left with two possibilities. One is that an intruder can come into the house, your home, and kill somebody and leave and nothing ever happens to that person. No one can find them. No one can bring them to justice. That's the one scenario, which is pretty scary in and of itself. Someone comes into your home, some shadow, does something horrible, and nothing ever happens to that person. The other scenario is that a family and people whose job it is to bring justice to a community simply don't do that. In fact, they do everything they can to frustrate that, which then undermines not only that community, but it starts to undermine the fabric of society. That we can lie to each other, we can manipulate each other, we can pretend and play games, and that eventually takes us somewhere where we aren't at the moment. Sorry, when I say at the moment, in 1996, that kind of thing where you turn reality into pageantry, when you turn Christmas into the dark side of Christmas, where the bright yellow star of hope becomes a black star of despair, that then becomes something that is waiting for us in our future. If you don't deal with this shadowy approach to justice, and have we dealt with it in 27 years, then it creeps further and further over the landscape, like the darkness in the Lord of the Rings. The darkness spreads, and all that is good in the world starts to get sick and can't grow anymore. And things that were once respected and loved, like elves, become orcs. And the elves of our world are becoming orcs. The people who are entrusted with justice are becoming orcs of injustice, right? And it's in that respect that I want to play what the clip from Lord of the Rings that deals with this. It's this. Yeah, he says it's a passing thing. The shadow and even the darkness has to pass. That's a nice sentiment. That's the kind of sentiment you think about over Christmas. But in this particular case, the darkness hasn't passed. The darkness has, if anything, expanded across the landscape. That star over Boulder has a darkness at the center of it. And you've got to make an effort to get to that star and to get to know it and to know it for what it really is, for the light to return. And that's not been happening. And our efforts at interrogating the truth and justice are very weak and very facile and very superficial. People who are thinking about the Ramsey case think about Gary Oliver, and next year it'll be John Mark Carr. It's very poor. It's a very poor effort. And so thinking, you know what, one day the light will just come back. Not if we don't fight for it. Not if we don't fight for it.
A new day will come.
That's a nice thing to hope for. You know, maybe one day things will be back to normal. Maybe one day we'll just have a generation of people who are good. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there's a momentum that's actually taking us in the opposite direction. If I look at true crime, if I look at the cases I cover and how many channels outnumber me in telling stories that I really believe aren't true, such as Kylie Rodney was murdered. I don't believe that she was. How many channels are telling you that story? There's no evidence supporting that. That in the Rex Heuermann case, his wife is involved in that. How many channels are part of that story that I believe is not true? If you have studied a case quite well, you should know that it is very likely not true. Most of the channels are telling you things that I think aren't true. In the Idaho Fall case, people are telling you that the perpetrator is a serial killer. I don't think that is true. And on and on and on and on. And if this is how we deal with truth and justice and the light, you know, if something bad happens, what hope is there for justice? What hope is there for the truth to emerge? And the way we deal with truth and reality in true crime is also how we deal with truth and reality in everything else. What's the truth and reality of COVID? What's the truth and reality of in a political thing? If we can't find it in a sort of practice thing like true crime, then we have no hope finding it in terms of when countries go to war with one another. And then we're really doomed as a species, because it means we don't know the truth about ourselves. We don't know the reality in the real world in real time, because we've been so good at lying to ourselves, or being lied to, or being manipulated to our entire lives. That's why it's important, for example, the Ramsey case, to say, what did happen here? If we can figure it out, maybe we can be real about other things in the real world. If people act as gatekeepers and they actively prevent things from coming to a certain point, then we need to deal with those gatekeepers, those people that are voted into positions of power only to deny justice for everybody, that they voted to do a job only to not do a job. Instead, they arguably just want to enrich themselves and their pals. People who are in a democratic society asked to help society be a democratic place where people can rely on justice, only to do the opposite. And so it does come down to the question, how much good in the world, and isn't a bit of good that is in the world going out the window? All of this, he says, I think I understand what this is all about. But he also says, you know, we may be a small person. I might be a small person in the scheme of things of the Ramsey case. Yeah, maybe you are as well. But if enough people care about something, it can be changed. It can be dealt with. If enough people don't think, then that is also what people learn. That is how you can manipulate people. There are enough people that just don't think about things. Every person that can think for themselves is an obstacle to that darkness. Right? One person that can think for themselves and not be manipulated is an obstacle to that sweeping darkness. It makes me think about me climbing to that star. I had lots of chances to turn back. I wasn't feeling so great. My heart was beating in my chest. It was icy, icy cold. The ground was literally falling away beneath my feet. It was treacherous. It was slippery. It was dangerous even. It took much longer time than I thought it would. I thought it would be 2 minutes. I think it took 10 minutes. It was a lot harder than I thought. And not only that, in the effort to get to where we are now, I ended up writing one trilogy after another, right? And I could have given up long before I got to the point where I did get to. Right? It started with this book, and it was meant to be one book. I didn't go, I'm going to write 11 books on the Ramsey case. I wrote one book, and then I realized that there was a lot that I didn't know, and then I found that out, and another thing, and another thing, and another thing. And it ended up being a trilogy called The Craven Silence, a trilogy called The Day After Christmas, a trilogy called Black Star Over Bethlehem. And I had many chances to just stop going down that road, right? And so what kept me going? Well, it's what he says right here. What should keep us going? Right? That's what we're holding on for. When you see that star represents good and hope and truth and light. And if you think about the district attorney, that's exactly what he represented. Hope that this case is going to be dealt with. Someone who is supposedly preoccupied with the truth. a good person who is trying to do good things to serve his community, and altogether create a community under that hope, under that light, under that star, a community that's worth having, a community that is going to thrive in this bosom of goodness, right? And you're making a mistake if you just hope, naively hope, that it's just going to happen on its own. You're making a mistake. I was watching a World War II documentary where they just the Germans had just invaded Poland, and someone was standing in front of a cross of a crucifix, like a life-size crucifix, like this. And I was thinking, that's not going to work. That alone is not going to save you from what's coming. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to think about what's happening beyond what you're being told is happening, right? And so, in other words, this good that we're talking about actually comes from us. You can't hope for it in someone else or hope for it in a star. That good's got to come from us. And I must say, when I was in America, I found good people around me, good people that care about America, that care about the truth, that, including someone who took me to the Christmas star and waited the long period that I went there, waited in the cold, right? And care enough to also go out and take photos of the snow early in the morning when it's cold. But make no mistake, I think we are starting to be outnumbered by people who are either bad people. When I say bad, I mean bad people who think about only themselves, or who don't care about accountability, or only care about themselves, or people who are just so shallow that they don't see what is happening to their world. They're caught up in the ignorance of their lives. And that is what concerns me, is that, yes, there are good people, and the world is worth fighting for those good people, but we are being overrun. We're being overrun by people who aren't good and don't care. And all of that entropy is a gathering darkness. And you might say, it's not my job to pick up a sword and go to whichever country. But what you can do is, in a true crime space, you can look at what's happening and say, I don't think that's true. And I wonder whether you know that that's not true. Can you please stop doing this? Can you please stop manipulating this community that you've got with nonsense? Let's spend more of our time dealing with reality, dealing with finding our way to the truth, not finding our way through a labyrinth of content. Half of it is shocking nonsense, right? And so you have an important role to play in the true crime space, where we get back to the golden thread of truth, and we stop messing around in the shallows of nonsense. You know, Jesus had 12 disciples, 12 people who went on and they changed the world. I've got a lot of supporters here who know why being authentic is so valuable, right? And you guys are the 526 people in here. If only 10% of you, if only 50 of you go out there and you hold people accountable for talking bullshit when they're covering true crime, that Nicola Bully is the victim of foul play. You know, stop this nonsense. Stop this nonsense. Then we've got a better chance of dealing with the real world beyond true crime than if we just allow this thing to keep rolling by. This whole social media Ouroboros goes beyond true crime. There are now very big personalities that are sweeping up people all around the world with populist, tribalist things. And it's not the truth, and it is something that is becoming more and more harmful to democracies and to the rule of law and to individuals and communities. Make no mistake, that's a shadow that's creeping over the world, and people are benefiting handsomely out of that. Individuals. Meanwhile, more bigger and bigger groups of people are learning just to follow blindly into an abyss. It's really not, what I'm telling you is really not a small deal. It's the story of our time. Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, I could mention names, but I'd rather not. And what I'm saying is, I'm telling you my spiel, but it's really up to many of you to resist this ignorance that is sweeping our planet at a time when we have no right to be misinformed about things. All we need to do is think about things and think critically. And the Google algorithm also tells you what you want to hear. You need to ask Google the things that it's not telling you. What don't I know? And so if it's definitely happening, I want to call upon you guys to be part of that process of thinking critically about your lives and about what you are being told. It's got to start somewhere, right? It's got to start somewhere. And there's so much money and incentive in telling people what they want to hear and helping people out of the ditch into the disaster. How do they say it in Afrikaans? Eddie Sloot and the, I don't know how it goes, but it's basically things are going to get worse if we allow this to happen. And free speech isn't the wonderful thing that it may sound like it is, because free speech allows a lot of toxic people with distorting messages to say whatever they want. And unfortunately, it's human nature that the shocking, untrue thing is far more interesting and catches on than the dry truth of the matter. But it ends up being that we just can't tell anymore what is true and what isn't. And for any species, that's a very, very dangerous place to be. Imagine there's a little bird flying around. Literally, imagine there's a little bird flying. And I can't tell what's true and what's not. Imagine there's a little antelope that's born into the world and it walks around a bush. And there's a lion or something camouflaged in the grass. The life of that animal is based on whether it can tell that there's something there or that there's nothing to worry about. You know what I'm saying? If you can't see that there's a threat there, then you are a sitting duck. You are easy meat. You easy pickings. And we're now entering a period of war in a way, where there's a war in Ukraine, there's a war in the Middle East. And we need to know really what is happening in our world to, first of all, to try and make sure this war doesn't spread, but also to know what side we're on and to know what side we should be on. Do you know that the Second World War started on propaganda? In other words, Hitler invaded Poland because he said that Poland attacked a radio tower, and that was a total psyop. It's a word I almost never ever use. But in other words, that war was contrived. The Germans wanted a war, right? An entire world war could have been prevented if somebody looked at that and said, okay, we're not going to fall for this. So I want to kind of end on that note. Have any of you heard of the Gleiswitz incident? It was a false flag attack on a radio station in Poland, staged, right? On the night of 31st August 1939. I'm not going to say anything more about it. You guys can read about it yourselves. It's on Wikipedia. Go and check it out. And that is the inability to tell the difference between staging and the real world. You might say, oh, staging is harmless. I didn't know that happened. Staging can lead to a world war. That's what happened over there, right? And so critical thinking could have stopped everything right there with that particular thing. Critical thinking from Germany's own generals and Germany's own population and everyone else that was looking on. Critical thinking. Critical thinking is not a very sexy, fun thing. It takes effort. Like climbing to that star takes effort. But it can actually make the difference between the light and the dark. I mean, it literally is the difference between the light and the dark, right? So that's it from my side. I see we had about the 3-hour mark. I really thought this was going to be 1 hour, but there you have it. I do want to do I want to take, I'm sure it'll be just 100 of you, or maybe 50 of you. I want to take you guys with me on my journey through America, how I got to the Christmas star at the end of it, but also how it started. I mean, I arrived in America in October, about the 19th, 18th, 19th of October, and within 4 days I had COVID, and within a few days after that I was coughing blood, and I could really just have gone home. I could have said, this is not really working out, it's not really easy, it's not really what I signed up for, I'm just going to go home and get better. I tried, but I thought that it was necessary to commit to this thing that I'd set out to do, which was to go to Texas and attend a trial and deal with that aspect, right? And to be honest, all along the way to Texas, like the climb to that star, I was trying to find reasons to not go. I had a secondary infection. I had some financial troubles. My credit card got declined, and so on and so on and so on. There were many reasons just to not go. And so at the end of the day, was it worth it? Was it worth going all that way? And so I kind of want to just share some of that with you. And also some of the fun stuff. Going to Roswell. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you see that on the screen? Going to Roswell, New Mexico, and finding, of all things, spaceports and rockets, right? So that's some of the stuff I want to share with you guys. I hope some of you are going to try and make it for that. What I'm going to share with you was supposed to be my Thanksgiving message, but I was unfortunately too sick and tired, genuinely sick and tired, when I was in Myrtle Beach to do it. So this will be the Thanksgiving message, just a month late. Yeah. So I'm going to be taking you through my visits to 9 different crime scenes, and then also through the fabric of America. I'll just show you some of the photos that I took. So it should be quite interesting. Thanks a lot, Sarah Bell. Thank you. I didn't see any aliens. I am feeling better. I'm feeling better. Okay, so that's it from me. I want to thank mods again for being wonderful. I want to thank those who've super chatted and become members. Welcome. And we're looking forward to another year. And hopefully we're going to see true crime improve in 2024. That, I think, is the question we've got to ask in January and the beginning of the year. We can see where true crime is right now. Is it going to become a more self-aware, thoughtful, intelligent environment, or is it headed for basically fake news? You can make a shitload of money, but it's all a circus. Is true crime headed to become a circus act, or is it actually achieving a little bit of legitimacy at the end of the day? That's the question we're going to ask throughout 2024, and this time next year try and answer. And with your help, it'll be the latter, that it has become a bit of a more legitimate space than it used to be. Do you guys agree? That's something worth pursuing, worth thinking about, worth following. Do you agree? In other words, that we're going to look at true crime almost from the outside. Where is it going? Where's the woods of true crime heading? How well did true crime handle this case? How well are they handling the sensitivity around Idaho 4? How badly are they handling this, that, and the next thing, etc., etc.? Thanks a lot, Bria, Chelsea, Stephanie, Terry, Sharon, where are you? Kat Kruger, good to see you here. I must say, Tim hasn't played with his thing, his cow for a while. Okay, so that's it from me. Like I said, I'll be back for a 4th live in a row. Can you believe it? Just dealing, but it's kind of not really dealing with a specific case, but dealing with my journey through the true crime fabric of America and a little bit beyond that. As I said, there should be some fun stuff. As I said, I took some photos of rockets in a museum in Roswell, so it should be quite interesting. I hope you guys have had a good Christmas. Stephanie, you sent me some cards that looked like you had a wonderful Christmas. The photos of your tree also look pretty cool. I hope you've had a good festive season, and hopefully some fun days and nights are still in store for us. It'll be around about the same time as this one, around about the same time. Okay. I'll confirm it closer to the time. Okay, that's it. Thanks, guys. Keep warm. It's very hot here. I've actually got to get out of this. I can hear thunderstorms brewing in the background, but keep warm and take care, and I will see you guys next time.